My name is Lynn, and I'm 34 years old. 11 years ago, my older brother told me I was throwing my life away by refusing to send my deaf son to a residential school. Last spring, Aaron's composition was licensed for $1,850,000. 6 weeks later, my brother showed up with an attorney and a list of reasons he deserved a share of it. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't send a long email. I told my attorney 3 words: let them sit. Let them say every claim out loud, in a room with a witness, where it would cost something to take it back. What happened in that conference room didn't surprise me, but it surprised everyone else, including the 2 people who walked in, convinced they had already won. If you're here with me, please stay. This took 11 years to finish. Aaron's father left 3 weeks after the diagnosis came home with us. I won't spend more time on that than it deserves, which is about 1 sentence. He couldn't handle it. He left. What I had left was Aaron, a 1-bedroom apartment in Richmond, Virginia, a data entry job that paid slightly more than nothing, and a brother I was about to lose. Aaron was 5 when bacterial meningitis took most of his hearing over the course of 10 days in the hospital. The doctors were good about explaining what remained: some low-frequency detection in one ear, enough to feel bass, not enough to follow speech. And I nodded through every conversation and drove home each night, sitting in the hospital parking lot for a few extra minutes before I could make myself go back inside. He was still my boy. He still lined his toy cars up by color before he'd play with a single one. He still laughed when I made faces at him across the dinner table. He still reached up for my hand in parking lots without looking. Nothing about him changed in that hospital. Only the road ahead looked different than I'd drawn it. My brother, Craig's reaction, taught me the shape of the next 11 years, though I didn't understand it yet. Craig didn't ask how Aaron was holding up, or how I was. He asked what we were going to do about it. He had already looked up programs. There was a place in Western Virginia, he told me, a residential academy for deaf children, good staff, good structure. Aaron would be around kids who understood him. I could get back on my feet. I could have a life. He is my life, I said. Craig looked at his wife, Melissa, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded. She had the expression of someone who had already had this conversation privately and arrived at a conclusion without me. You realize what you're walking away from, Craig said. It wasn't a question. I realized. I just didn't agree with his list. I didn't find out about the letter until 4 months later. I was sorting old mail when I found a brochure tucked behind some junk for a place called Meadowbrook Residential Academy. I had never heard of it. I had never contacted them, but when I called the number on the back, the woman in admissions recognized our last name immediately. We did receive an inquiry, she said carefully. A family member submitted a questionnaire for a child matching your son's name and age. We sent our enrollment packet to your home address because you're the legal parent of record. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Who submitted the inquiry? She read me the name, Craig Harmon, my brother. He had contacted an institution about my son, without telling me, without asking me. Without once looking at Aaron sitting on the living room rug, lining up his cars the way he did every afternoon since we moved in. I drove to the post office and rented a P.O. box. I didn't want anything else arriving at the apartment that wasn't meant for me, and I went home and found a large manila envelope in the back of my closet. The kind with the small metal clasp you fold down, and I put the Meadowbrook brochure inside it, along with the enrollment inquiry form they'd mailed me, with my brother's handwriting in every blank. His handwriting, his phrasing. The child's condition makes him increasingly difficult for the family to manage. I closed the clasp and told myself I'd never need it. I put it on the top shelf of the hall closet. I stopped speaking to Craig. I stopped speaking to Melissa. I found a second job, and I moved Aaron and me to Roanoke and I told myself that starting over is just something some people have to do twice. What came next was not cinematic. There was no montage. There was just the grinding, bone-tired work of raising a kid while holding your life together with both hands. Aaron had some residual hearing, enough to feel bass through floors and speakers, enough to sense when someone walked heavily into a room. We learned sign language together in the evenings, both of us beginners. He got better at it than I ever did. He was always like that. He would encounter a new system for 2 weeks and understand it completely, and then quietly exceed it. I learned to navigate IEP meetings and interpreter schedules, and the particular bureaucratic maze of getting accommodations enforced at schools that were underfunded and overwhelmed. I learned which stores had fluorescent lights that bothered him and which ones he could handle. I learned that transitions went smoothly if I gave him a 5-minute warning and a 2-minute one, and that skipping the warnings cost us an hour. There was a woman named Tricia in our neighborhood with a deaf daughter, and she became my unofficial education for about 3 years. She handed me a cup of coffee one afternoon and said, without looking up from her own, "Stop trying to fix what isn't broken." It was the most useful thing anyone said to me in that entire decade. Money was tight in a way that has its own specific texture. You know the exact price of everything and buy almost none of it. I got precise about grocery carts. I got practiced at the arithmetic of covering a bill in 2 payments. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the phone number I still had memorized. There were nights, especially those first few years when I was so tired and so alone that I'd take my phone out and pull up Craig's contact. The way your hand reaches for a light switch in a house you do longer live in, I'd get to the screen and stop. After the first few times, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried quietly enough. Not to wake Aaron, I stopped reaching backward altogether. I put that energy into reaching toward him instead. It turned out to be the better direction. Craig, in those years, was telling a story about me. I found out from our Aunt Shirley, who texted me when Aaron was 8. She was the kind of woman who mailed holiday cards with her whole heart, real penmanship, proper stamps, and I'd always trusted her. Her text was cool and puzzled. "I heard you're not letting Craig see Aaron," she wrote. "That seems harsh, given how much he's tried." When I called her, what she told me took a minute to land fully. Craig had told the family I had cut him off without reason, that I was unstable, using Aaron's diagnosis to isolate myself from everyone who cared about us. That he had tried for years to stay in our lives and I had pushed him away because I was too proud to accept help. He cried about it at Christmas. Every year. My aunt had watched my brother set grief on the holiday table like a dish he'd brought specially, and she passed it around without questioning the recipe. Why would she? He was family, and he cried in the right places. I typed 3 paragraphs to Shirley that night and deleted all of them, because I saw what I was doing. I was auditioning again, standing in front of people who had already cast me in a role and begging them to reread the script. I had spent 11 years not defending myself, because defending myself felt like begging. I wasn't going to do it louder now. Aaron didn't ask many questions about Craig. He asked me once, when he was 7, why his uncle didn't come to birthday parties. I told him some family needed distance sometimes and that it wasn't about him. He accepted that answer in the way children do when they understand more than they're letting on. What I didn't know was that he was keeping his own record. Every year, on Craig's birthday and at Christmas, Aaron made a card. Careful ones, geometric patterns on the front, neat lettering, sealed with the little stickers stars he liked. We'd walk to the blue mailbox on the corner and he'd push them through the slot himself. They came back, everyone. I didn't realize until he was 9 when one came back with the return to sender stamp visible through the window. Red ink dragged across the front of his drawing. Refused. I stood at the mailbox and held it, and felt something go small and tight in my chest that took a long time to unknot. I kept letting him mail them for another year, because I couldn't bear to be the one who took the hope away. When I finally stopped, I couldn't tell him why. I said the post office kept losing them, and I hated myself a little each time. I put the returned cards into the manila envelope on the closet shelf and told myself the same thing I always told myself. I was protecting him. I was wrong about that, but I didn't find out how wrong for another 4 years. Aaron was 12 when he started making music. This sounds stranger than it is if you understand how he hears. He catches low frequencies. Bass moves through floors, through the soles of your feet, through the side of a speaker if you press your palm flat against the cone. He had been doing that since he was small, pressing his whole hand to my old Bluetooth speaker and closing his eyes like he was reading something. What he was doing, I came to understand much later, was mapping. He started with free software on an old laptop, arranging clips and loops by feel as much as by listening. Then our school district connected us with a woman named Nina Caldwell, who ran adaptive music classes at the Community Art Center. She had worked with deaf students for over 20 years. She met Aaron without making a production of it, just handed him a set of vibration transducers, pointed at the studio computer, and let him figure it out. She told me afterward, carefully, what she'd noticed. "He isn't writing songs," she said, watching him through the glass. "He's building architecture. The silence is deliberate. He's using empty space the way other composers use a note." Aaron's work had a specific quality that I recognized before I could name it. A tension in the quiet sections, a pattern to the way sound dropped out and returned that made you feel like you'd been waiting for something you couldn't identify. Critics later would call it structural restraint. Nina called it emotional precision. When I asked Aaron once what he was trying to do, he thought for a long moment and said, "I'm writing down what it sounds like when someone doesn't answer." I thought he meant it abstractly. He started his longest composition when he was 14. He called it Returned. He worked on it for 2 years, headphones off, feeling the output through floor speakers. He wouldn't let me listen while it was in progress. That was the same year he found the envelope. I was clearing the hall closet and stepped away to answer the door. When I came back, Aaron was sitting on the hallway floor with the manila envelope open in his lap. Reading slowly, the Meadowbrook paperwork, the admissions inquiry form with Craig's handwriting in every blank, the birthday cards, each one bearing the red stamp. He didn't say a word. He read each piece and set it down and read the next. Then he put everything back exactly as it had been, closed the clasp, and returned the envelope to the shelf. He went to his room. I made dinner. We ate. I waited for him to say something. He never did. But the composition he was building got longer. Returned, premiered when Aaron was 16 at a small showcase Nina organized. 11 minutes and 20 seconds, pre-recorded layers Aaron conducted live from a control board. The silence in it was extraordinary. It pressed against you. It had a shape. I sat in the 4th row and watched strangers go completely still. An older man near the back put his hand over his mouth. I found him in the lobby afterward. He told me the piece reminded him of his daughter, who had stopped speaking to him years ago, of messages he'd sent that she never opened. He had no idea he was sitting inside the literal truth of one specific boy's childhood. That's what made it travel. Everyone who heard Returned heard their own version of being refused. A licensing producer attended the showcase on a tip from Nina. By the time Aaron was 17, serious people were having serious conversations. Last spring, at a meeting I sat through with my hands folded in my lap, a streaming platform acquired Returned as the title composition for a flagship documentary series. The licensing fee was $1,850,000. Aaron stood beside me in a button-down shirt he had chosen himself. He looked at the floor while the number was read aloud. Neither of us breathed. Because he was 17, the money went into a custodial trust with his name on it. A court-appointed trustee reviewed every detail. My attorney, Cynthia Reeves, who works out of a modest office near the courthouse and gives you the truth without dressing it up, had one instruction she repeated until it was part of me. That money is his. Your job is to guard it. Keep every record clean. Your name appears once in this paperwork as custodian, and you don't touch a cent. I did exactly that. The arts column that ran in the Richmond paper was kind. It described returned as a study in deliberate absence, built around the grammar of what is withheld. It used Aaron's first name. At our insistence, no photograph. In Northern Virginia, in a house I hadn't been welcome in for 11 years, someone read that column and started doing different math. My brother's voicemail came first. His voice was warm in a way I hadn't heard in over a decade. Slow and careful, syrup over gravel. So proud of him, he said. Family should celebrate together. He used the word together twice before he said Aaron's name once. The ordering told me everything I needed to know. Then came the letter from his attorney. The language was polished and measured, the way a closed trap looks reasonable from above. My brother sought recognition of his years of family support. He felt that, given the complexity of a significant custodial trust, a neutral co-fiduciary might better serve Aaron's interests. A third paragraph was softer on the surface, and worse underneath. It referenced the mother's documented history of instability without elaborating, because it doesn't need to elaborate, it just needs to make someone wonder. I took it to Cynthia the same afternoon. She read it without expression and set it down. They're not asking for money first, she said. They're asking for standing. Standing gets them into the room. Once they're in the room, the money question follows naturally. So, we fight it. She shook her head once. You don't fight it, you let them talk. Every word they put on the record is a word they'll have to stand behind. Let them build the case themselves. And when they're finished, then we look at what they've actually built. I carried that sentence home. I sat at the kitchen table while Aaron was working in his room, and I thought about 11 years of not defending myself. About the thing I had kept on a closet shelf for over a decade and never once opened in front of anyone. Aaron overheard more of the call with Cynthia than I'd planned. He appeared in the doorway when I hung up, pencil behind his ear the way he always does when he's been working. He signed. They want part of it. I nodded. The cards, the ones they sent back, not a question. I said yes. He went back to his room. I stood in the kitchen and understood that my son had known this story far better than I did for a very long time, and that he had been waiting, without telling me, for this exact moment to arrive. I called Aunt Shirley that week, not to explain myself, to invite her. Craig had already called her. I found out later he'd asked her personally to attend as a family witness, confident in 11 years of her loyalty. I agreed she should come. I wanted her there. Craig had chosen her because he was certain of her. That was his first mistake. The night before the meeting, Aaron told me he was coming too. He said it the way he says things he has already decided. Quiet, finished, not open for negotiation. He was prepared in a way I hadn't fully seen until he sat down at the kitchen table that evening, with the manila envelope open in front of him. The birthday cards arranged in order, oldest to newest, and on top of the stack, a small card sealed in an envelope he'd made himself, heavy cream paper folded and glued by hand, his careful printing on the front. I didn't ask what it said. I understood, without being told, that this one wasn't for Craig. Craig and his attorney arrived at Cynthia's office at 10 in the morning. The attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, had the measured confidence of someone who had prepared a presentation. Craig dressed carefully. He smiled at Cynthia. He smiled at Aaron's court-appointed trustee, who had come to observe. He looked at me briefly. He did not look at Aaron. He had come to make decisions about my son without once meeting his eyes. Aaron was sitting beside me with a leather portfolio flat on the table in front of him. Gerald Fitch opened smoothly. Years of family support, the anguish of estrangement, genuine concern for a vulnerable minor navigating a significant financial matter, a simple desire to help manage things responsibly. My brother spoke next, and it was clear he had been waiting a long time for an audience this large and this attentive. He described reaching out to us over the years and being turned away. He described grieving at holidays. His voice broke in the right places. He had practiced this. Aunt Shirley, at the far end of the table, nodded along the way. She had nodded along for years. I did nothing. I folded my hands in my lap and let every word land on the record. Cynthia glanced at me. That was the signal. Aaron opened his portfolio. He took out the birthday cards one at a time and set them in a row across the table. 8 cards, 8 years, careful drawings on the front. Geometric patterns, a piano keyboard, a speaker rendered in colored pencil, his name in the corner, and across the front of each one, the stamp in dragged red ink. Refused, return to sender. These are the cards I sent you, Aaron said. His voice is quieter than average, precise in its flatness when he's conserving energy. Every year. You sent all of them back. Gerald Fitch said something about postal errors. Mail gets lost. This proved nothing. Aaron reached back into the portfolio. He set the Meadowbrook paperwork on the table, the enrollment inquiry form. He turned it, so the handwriting faced the length of the table, toward Aunt Shirley at the far end. The room went quiet in a different way. Shirley reached out and picked it up. She read it slowly. I watched her face change the way a room changes when the light source shifts, not dramatically, just all at once and completely. She set it down carefully. Craig, she said, that's your handwriting. Not a question, not yet angry. Just the careful voice of a woman who has had a firm belief cut away from under her and is still finding her footing. Craig started to say something and stopped. Aaron wasn't finished. He took out his phone and set a small Bluetooth speaker on the table. He looked at his uncle, the first direct eye contact between them all morning, and pressed play. Returned opened with 11 seconds of complete silence. Then, a single, low note. Then, what sounded like paper being sorted in an envelope. A dry, rhythmic shuffling that turned out to be a sample Aaron had recorded and looped, building into something that swelled and fell away. The silence between the phrases had a shape. It pressed against you. He let it play for 90 seconds. Then he stopped it. The work you want a share of, he said, is those. He touched the row of cards with 2 fingers. I built it from the sound of what came back. Gerald Fitch had a legal pad in front of him. He did not write anything on it. There was nothing left to argue. You cannot cross-examine a row of envelopes bearing your client's handwriting on the inquiry form beside them. Craig didn't speak for a long time. My brother, who had arrived that morning prepared to question my fitness as a mother, sat across the table from a 17-year-old who had just quietly documented 11 years of being refused, built something irreplaceable from it, and walked into that room more prepared than anyone with a law degree in the building. Shirley excused herself for a few minutes. I found out later, she cried in the hallway. Cynthia let the silence sit. Then, very quietly, I think we have everything we need. The claim was formally withdrawn 6 days later, a short letter, no raised letterhead, no soft language. Just a sentence confirming that all claims regarding the trust were being dropped and no further action would be pursued. The co-fiduciary petition was never filed. Aaron's money remained exactly where it had always been, in a trust with his name on it, and my clean record sitting beside it as the only thing I ever put there. Shirley called me the following week. She cried. And this time I heard something different underneath it. Not guilt management, but the sound of a person who had been fair for 60 years and had spent 11 of them being used, and didn't know yet how to carry that. She said she was sorry. She said she'd believed him because he cried and because it had never occurred to her to ask for proof. I told her it was okay. It wasn't entirely, and we both knew it, but it was something I meant in the direction of true, and that was all I had. She went home and told the rest of the family what had happened, not all at once, but she told it. And the version of me that Craig had been building for 11 years. The unstable sister, the selfish mother, the woman who hid her own son out of spite, began to fall apart the way things fall apart when the person who believed in them longest finally doesn't. Craig never contacted me. I didn't expect him to. The manila envelope is in a drawer now instead of on the closet shelf. It's lighter. Everything inside it has done its work and been set down. Aaron decided, in his own time, that part of his trust would fund a music program at the Arts Center where he'd gotten his start, specifically for deaf and hard-of-hearing kids who want to compose. He worked out the details with Nina, who cried when he told her. She runs it now. I want other kids to have a way to say what they can't say out loud, he told me when I asked him about it. A real way, that someone will hear. He is working on a new composition. He won't tell me the title. But I walked past his room last week and heard underneath his floor speaker something that sounded the way a door sounds when it opens outward instead of closing inward. There is one last thing. The sealed card he'd placed on top of the stack in his portfolio, the one I didn't read, the one that was never for Craig. He handed it to me in the parking lot after the meeting, when it was just the two of us walking toward the car in the February cold. On the front, in his careful handwriting, for the person who answered. I opened it standing next to the car, inside one sentence. I always knew you were listening. I just wanted you to have it in writing. My brother spent 11 years telling anyone who would hear him that I had abandoned my family. Aaron answered it the way he answers everything. Quietly, precisely, in a language my brother never once tried to learn. The only thing I gave my son that I didn't plan to was proof that staying is its own kind of statement. Not loud. Not performed for an audience, just present, every morning for as long as it took. It turned out that was enough.